So here's a quick overview. We're going to kind of look at 4 basic things, all kind of building towards the same goal. It's really going to be about 10 pages of introduction and 2 pages of message, but here it is. We're going to look at reasons why people don't join a church. Then we're going to try to understand and answer this question: is church membership even biblical? Is it just something that man came up with, or something that pastors came up with to try to get people to be committed to church? We're going to look at the 2 defining marks of the church, and then finally we're going to end with what is always my favorite part: how to be a committed member, how to whatever it is. I always like those because that's where the rubber hits the road, and that's where I can try to fix, change, or implement for myself. So let's get right into it. Why do people not join a local church? Listen to this testimony from a man who grew up in church. He since had some of these views corrected and changed through the Word, but it's very interesting. When I graduated from my church's high school youth group, I started visiting around other churches. I loved God and had big dreams for how I wanted to serve Him, but I didn't see any reason to get too involved in any one church. By then, I thought I knew all there was to know about church, and I wasn't impressed. Most churches struck me as out of date and out of touch. There had to be a better, more efficient way of accomplishing great things for God. How many times have you heard a similar testimony from someone who maybe has discontinued going to church, or maybe has always just kind of maybe played musical churches, and they're over here, and you see them once a Sunday or once a month, and they're here, over here, there, everywhere? Recently, somebody told me, well, we're all part of the universal church, and it doesn't really matter where we go to church as long as we attend church somewhere. The person was partially right. We are a part of the universal church. You're right there. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 23. We all are a part of the churches that are meeting in the Philippines and in Korea and in China and anywhere else this morning. We are all part of the universal church if we're saved this morning with Christ as its head. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 23. To the general assembly and the church of the firstborn, which are written in heaven, and to God, the judge of all. So we are, yes, and we have many other verses. We talked about this a lot when we were going through our study, corporate worship. We all are, as believers, a part of the church of God. We're all written in the Lamb's Book of Life. We're all saved by the same man, Jesus Christ. We all are going to the same heaven, but because of the confines of location, we are all not a part of the same local body. It matters a great deal if and where we attend church. Many believers believe that loyal membership to a local church is outdated, restrictive, and even unbiblical. They're wrong. After salvation, why do Christians not join a local church? Each case is unique and different. But when we boil it all down and we kind of scrape everything away, it comes down to a few basic reasons and instances. Number 1, indifference. They can take church membership or leave it. Church doesn't really matter to them. Maybe they haven't grown in the Lord. Church membership, I believe, would really help them to grow in the Lord and realize their need, but they're just indifferent. They don't feel negatively towards it. They really don't feel positively towards it. They're just indifferent. Number 2, ignorance. They're just simply uninformed. No one has ever just sat down and shared with them, hey, once you're saved and baptized and you want to start following the Lord, joining a church is another great step in your Christian walk. They've never considered the Bible's view on church membership, and therefore no decision has been made. Indifference, ignorance. Number 3, indecision. These are the people who they can't make a decision for themselves. They're the people who, no matter what it is, spiritually or at work or anything else, they never come to a decision. And if you think, well, I'm not that person, and if I asked you, hey, do you think you're that person? Let me get back with you. You're that person, all right? Indecision. You just have a hard time having someone nail your feet down and say, I need an answer right now. Number 4, independence. These people, they don't want to be restricted or saddled to one church or, catch this, the burdens of church membership. These people they know that they ought to join a church, and they know the benefits of it, and these people are charactered enough that if they were to join, they would volunteer, they would vote, They would serve because they know that's what they ought to do. So as not to obligate themselves to doing those things, they simply don't join. They want to come in, worship, be edified, and leave unattached. Why do people not join a church? Indifference, ignorance, indecision, independence. Let's get to the right page here. Injury. This is a big one. And my heart goes out to these folks more than anyone else. Because this should not happen, but it does far too often. There are those who have been a part of a local body for decades. And after having been through 1, 2, 5, 10 church experiences that go sour due to a pastor or a youth leader or a Jezebel or poorly managed finances or fighting in meetings or fill in the blank, they will attend church, but they won't join. That's it. They are maybe like a special ops believer. Get in, get out, no collateral damage. Just get what you need and be like, I don't want to see any of the fighting. I don't want to see anything else. And here's what I have to say to you. If you're that person or you know someone like that, church is God's plan for the believer. And we're going to get to that. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. But church is God's plan for the believer. God's plan never fails man. But often man fails God's plan. And if you've ever been hurt in church, it's not because God made a poor decision in saying, hey, we ought to be part of a church. It's because there was a man or a woman or a group of men or women who didn't execute God's plan the way that He intended. And if you got hurt at a church, I'm sorry, but find another church that's being run right and join that one. Lastly, inverted loyalty. Inverted loyalty. These are the people who, I had to stretch a little bit to get the I. I'm sorry on this one. I generally am not an alliterator. I bristle at alliteration, but it was literally perfect until I got here. These are the people who have moved miles away or maybe used to attend a church that's now no longer in existence. They had to close the door or maybe were joined together with another body. And they've never been able to move on because they have never emotionally left a church from their past. And they just say, boy, I love the body here at Rogers City Baptist Church, but we attended, whatever so-and-so Baptist church for so many years, and man, I just, I have a hard time. Boy, I loved that pastor. At the root of all of these different things, what is the main problem? The main problem is failure to understand or take seriously God's intent that the local church to be central in the life of the believer. So those are some reasons why folks haven't or won't join a body. And I hope that one of those things are not something that's holding you back this morning. Number 2 that we're going to kind of look at, is church membership even biblical? If it's not, then what are we even doing preaching a message about it, right? So as with many things, you can't turn to the book of church membership in the Bible. However, the idea of church membership is found all throughout Scripture. Now this morning, we are not arguing or trying to prove the fact that church is important. We're just going to accept that as fact that the church is important. I think all of you would agree, because you're all here this morning. You could be doing any number of things. You're here at church. So church is important, but we are trying to take one step further and prove that church membership to a local specific body is important. A couple ideas of why church is important, because God throughout history has gathered His people, because God loves the church, because God gave Himself for the church, because God is coming back for the church. That's why the church is important. But we have to consider how many practices and commands in Scripture given in the New Testament, they all lose their meaning if membership to a local body isn't practiced. And that's where we're going to look at a few of these things. Number 1 is church leadership. 2 passages in Scripture outline the qualifications for a church's leadership and members. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 13. That's where it goes through the qualifications for a bishop, which would be a pastor, and then a deacon, which would be a deacon. And then also we would find those qualifications in Titus chapter 1, verses 5 through 9. And it goes through, if a man desires the office of a bishop, he desires the good work. And then he goes down through the lines, and he must be able to do this and that, and he doesn't do this, and all these different things. In addition, there are explicit commands for leaders to shepherd the flock and for Christians to submit to their godly leaders. Turn to Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 17. I think you're already in Hebrews. Should just be a page or two over. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 17. Obey them that have the rule over you, and submit yourselves, for they watch for your souls, as they that must give account, that they may do it with joy and not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you. So there's many places where it talk about the qualifications of a leader, and then also the exhortation for leaders to lead and believers to submit to the leadership. If there is no identifiable membership, then there's no one for leaders to lead, right? And if there is no membership, there is no leader to which the believer is to submit, right? Principle number 2 is church discipline. In 1 Corinthians chapter 5, we're going to find that for the most part, the chapter was written taking care of a really heinous situation that was happening in the church. Some infidelity to a bad degree. And it was written to address that sin. And notice, let's flip there. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 13. We're not going to take any time to look at the sin, but I want to see what the end, kind of the conclusion of the discipline is. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 13. But them that are without God judge. But them that are without, meaning not in the church body, God judgeth. Therefore, put away from among yourselves that wicked person. Jesus also gave a similar command in Matthew chapter 18, verse 15, when he's dealing with how do I deal with a brother when he's trespassed or offended me. Matthew chapter 18, verse 15, Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. That's always the first step, is always to involve as few people as possible. If you involve more people than you ought in the beginning, there's a word for that. It's either talebearing or busybody or gossip or anything like that. All right? Tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. Awesome. But if he will not hear thee, then take with thee 1 or 2 more, that in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. And if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it unto the church. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as an heathen man and a publican. So, again, what ought we to do in that situation? We ought to have them out of the membership. So if there is to be church discipline for any reason, how are we able to, in the words of Paul, put them away from among ourselves if there is no definite church body, church membership, or distinction from the world? Here's another principle that just proves that it is important to have a local body. Lists and voting. There are some evidence in that the early church kept some lists associated with its members. Turn to 1 Timothy chapter 5. I want you to put your eyes on it so you don't think I'm just cooking up something to prove my point. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 9. First Timothy 5:9. Let not a widow, what's the next phrase? Be taken into the number. There was some sort of account or tallying being made in the church. There's also implications of a church vote and agreement. In 2 Corinthians chapter 6, Paul is again addressing now the fact that a brother has been disciplined, has been put out of the church, and now he is calling for them to show towards that person and see if there's any way that that man can be brought back and restored and brought back into the church. But notice what it says in 2 Corinthians, I said chapter 2 is chapter 2. 2 Corinthians 2:6. Sufficient to such a man is this punishment, which was inflicted by many. So there, again, is implication that there was agreement by many in the body that, hey, brother so-and-so, he is openly doing wrong. We don't want that to be the testimony of our church. Are we all in agreement? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Something like that happened in this situation to put the brother out of the church. And he, for sake of time, we won't read these, but then he calls, confirm your love towards him. See if you can get him to come back. But again, there is principles of leading and submitting to leadership and church discipline and lists and votes that is not possible without a definite church membership. So I would say yes, church membership is biblical. So now let's look at part number 3, and then we'll get into the how-to. We've said why some people don't join. We've looked at is church member biblical. Look at the 2 defining marks of the church. 2 defining marks of the church. We're going to turn to John chapter 13 and John chapter 17. The 2 defining marks of the church. We've covered this quite a bit. I covered this in a Sunday school lesson a couple of years ago. Brother Kurt covered it very well when he was teaching through John. I've referenced these verses from time to time. Jesus in John 13 begins in verse 34. I give a new commandment unto you. In John 17, of course, is his prayer to the Father for the disciples and also the brethren that we're always going to be. 2 defining marks of the church. Number 1 is love. Number 2 is unity. Let's look at love first. John 13, verse 34. A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another, as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another. If we are to be true disciples of Christ, a defining mark is love for the brethren. You say, I am a good Christian. I love Christ. I just can't stand those people at church. You might not be that good of a Christian because you're not Christ-like, because Christ loves the church. He gave himself for the church. He's coming back for the church, and he's interceding for Christ is all about the church. And if you say, hey, I'm a good Christian, I just can't stand those Pharisaical brothers and sisters, maybe you need to do a little checkup. John chapter 17, verse 26. We're going to be there now. We're still confirming the defining mark as love. This is Jesus praying to his Father, and I have declared unto them thy name, and will declare it, that the love wherewith thou hast loved me may be in them, and I in them. What better place to show the love of Christ to the brethren than in the local church? Look how many of us are here this morning. And there's others in the nursery, and there's a bunch more over in junior church serving right now. It would take me literally all week to come to each and every one of your households and spend 10 minutes to a half an hour with you, have a cup of coffee, and share Christ's love with you. I'd have no problem doing that, but that would take up all my time. I wouldn't have time to be a family, wouldn't have time to study, wouldn't have time to have any time for myself or to sleep. And as our church grows, that only would become more and more difficult and time-consuming. But when we all gather together, it's almost like God knew what he was doing and says, hey, why don't we bring everyone all together a couple times a week, and we just let everybody love on each other for a couple hours. What a great idea. Thanks, God. And what better place to show the love to our brethren than at church? If we do that and we just, I'll see you guys, next month I'm going to go hit my other 5 churches. Well, when we cycle around, maybe if we all had that attitude, those other people would be doing the same thing, and we'd never meet up with each other, and we'd never get the opportunity to share Christ's love together. But I like this setup a whole lot better. Number 2 is unity. John chapter 17, we're in verse 21. Again, this is Jesus praying to the Father, that they all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that thou hast sent me. And the glory which thou gavest me I have given them, that they may be one, even as we are one. Again, is there any better way? This strikes even better for unity than it does for love. What better way to show the unity of Christ than being all together in one body at one time? That is literally the definition of unity. And if we are to fulfill quite literally Jesus' prayer to the Father for the church, love and unity, we can fulfill both of those things very beautifully in the local body. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24, and let us consider one another to provoke unto love and good works, forsaking not the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as ye see the day approaching. So, how do we become a committed church member? You say, Pastor, you've done a great job proving from the Word the point that church membership, local body church membership, is in fact biblical and important. How do I become a committed member? Here's just a couple ideas. Again, it's not going to be an exhaustive list, but we're just going to give a few ideas. Number one, attend regularly. Attend regularly. If someone tells me that they're a Packers fan, but they don't know what the Packers record is right now, they don't watch, which isn't very good, by the way. They don't watch the games. Don't know any of the players from the past. Say, hey, who was that? That great quarterback you used to have? That number 12 guy. I don't think much of you are a Packers fan because 12 guy is Brett Favre. No, I mean Aaron Rodgers. I have 2 sons named after the guy. But the same goes for church membership and as a Christian. You say, well, I'm a good Christian. Boy, I love God. Boy, but you don't attend church. You don't know Scripture. You don't serve in a local body. You don't edify the pastor or its members on a regular basis because you're not here. You don't evangelize the good news. I don't question that you're a Christian, but I question how good of a Christian you are. And I definitely know that you have some room to grow. Attend regularly. Hey, Hebrews, you say, well, are we supposed to? I know we're supposed to be a part of a body, but are we supposed to attend regularly? A lot of verses that prove that. Read Acts chapter 1, verse 6. It'll probably give you a good idea. Also, Hebrews chapter 10 that we just read, verses 24 through 26. Number 2, seek peace. Seek peace. Romans chapter 14, verse 19. Let us therefore follow after the things which make for peace, and things wherewith one may edify one another. James chapter 3, verse 18. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace. Of them, peace. If we're going to be a committed member, we're not going to come in thinking, boy, how can I get Pastor's goat today? How can I ask him a question that's going to irk him so that way his mind is on that rather than on the message, so that way he's not able to serve or preach as best as he could? How can I cause difficulty among the brethren? That's not a committed member. You're coming in as a wolf in sheep's clothing, seeking to destroy rather than to build up. We ought not to do that. And I'm thankful that we have a church who does not have people like that, who come in and try to divisively pull away from. You want to get a good idea of whether someone's a committed member or not? If this person claims to want to evangelize or claims to want to do all these different things, but they're always trying to pull people away from the body. They're trying to say, oh yeah, what Pastor's saying is good, but why don't you look over here? Or, oh yeah, that's a good idea, but what if we were to do this over here? And they're always trying to be divisive, or always trying to drive a wedge in between, or, oh, well, what if we were to, rather than just getting behind God's man, His Word, and saying, let's do what He's saying. Number 3, edify one another. 1 Corinthians chapter 14. Take a look at this verse, if you would, if you'd like to. 1 Corinthians 14, verse 26. 1 Corinthians 14, for the first 25 verses, is dealing a lot with what we ought not to do in church. Some different things that I believe it talks about speaking in tongues and different things of what that actually means. And that's definitely a different lesson for a different time. But we get to verse 26 and it says, well, if we're not supposed to do all of these things when we gather, then what are we supposed to do? Notice this. How is it then, brethren, when you come together, notice it doesn't say if, when you come together, every one of you hath a psalm, hath a doctrine, hath a tongue, hath a revelation, hath an interpretation, let all things be done unto edifying. What is it saying there? It's saying when we come together, when I shake Brother so-and-so's hand and say, hey, I'm so glad you're here. How's it going this week? give a brief idea of what's going on, but then say, hey, I read this and such. It was a real encouragement to me. Oh, you ever thought about this verse in the book of Genesis? I love what Brother Kurt was doing with Michael Butler on our way back from a conference recently. They were just coming up with these different Bible questions. He said, if you had to pick your only one book of the Bible that you could keep and all the rest of them had to go away, which one would it be? And what does that do? It just sparks conversation about the Bible and the Word of God. That's edification. And what the verse is saying here is when we come together, we all ought to have something to share. You say, well, I don't really have anything to share. A lot of times it's because you're not reading the Word, or you're not looking at or doing things that are going to have it. If you were to lead someone to the Lord this week, would you share that in the body? Right? You'd be, any praises? Yeah, brother so-and-so, he got saved this week. That's something to share. If you were to read something that said, the Lord opened my eyes in this area. I had a decision to make, and the Lord slapped me in the face and said, this is what I'm supposed to do. Would you share that? If you heard a song this week and he said, boy, that song was it ministered to my spirit. But the reason a lot of times we don't have anything to share is because we're filling our minds and our time with things that aren't worth sharing in the body. That means that we need to filter out and get a different agenda of what we're looking at, listening to, and reading. Because when we come together, I wrote it this way. Our fellowship at church should look like a spiritual think tank. Everyone sharing and encouraging with verses and praises and songs. It shouldn't look like snack time at a daycare. One person with food being swarmed by immature, starving baby Christians looking for a spiritual animal cracker and juice box to make it through the week. That's what it ought not. You ever seen snack time in the nursery? You got one nursery worker and they're getting the box of animal crackers and everyone's. That's not what it should look like. It shouldn't be pastor being the only one that's spiritual and you're saying, boy, I hope he's got something good this week because I'm empty. It should all of us coming with a full tank saying, hey, I got something to share. This was an awesome verse. This was an awesome passage. This was an awesome song. That's what we ought to do. And it doesn't mean that all of us have to have time behind the mic to do it. You can just spend time with one or two believers. But boy, if we all are doing that, we get to preach 1,000 messages at church, not just one or two. Mark 10:44. Whatsoever. Let's keep moving. Verse number 4. We got a little bit more to cover here. Number 4. Warn and admonish one another. A committed member speaks the truth in love to help avoid pitfalls and edify unto holiness. That's all the time we'll spend there. But don't be afraid to speak the truth in love. Number 5, pursues reconciliation. Notice these verses in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 18. Reconciliation, talking about several things. Being reconciled or brought back, of course, is talking about salvation, but also trying to bring back those brothers and sisters that have fallen away and are lost. And all things are of God, who hath reconciled us unto himself by Jesus Christ, and hath given to us the ministry of reconciliation. To wit, that God was in Christ, reconciling the world unto himself, not imputing their trespasses unto them. Hold on a second. Think about that under the lens of trying to bring a brother or sister back to the church. I'll read that again. To wit, that God was in Christ, reconciling the world unto himself, not imputing their trespasses unto them. Have stopped going to church, that have done some things that are wrong and openly and maybe even unashamedly at the time. They need to be brought back. And they don't need someone saying, well, look what you did. And they know what they did. All right? But we ought to always have an open door. Reconciling. We were reconciled back to God. We ought to be willing to reconcile others that are willing to be reconciled. And hath committed unto us the word of reconciliation. Now then, we are ambassadors for Christ. As though God did beseech you unto us, we pray you in Christ's stead, be ye reconciled to God. Number 6, how do I become a committed member? Bear burdens. We must help each other withstand disappointment, frustration, loss, attack, slander, offense, illness. Romans 5, verse 15, verse 1. Notice this. We then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak and not to please ourselves. You know that bearing burdens for others is not fun? There's literally nothing in it for you. when someone comes and says, hey, will you pray for me? And they just unload a bunch of burdens. You're like, well, the sorrow of knowledge, as Solomon says, right? Why do we do that? For our own benefit? No. For the bettering of the body of Christ. We then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak and not to please ourselves. Galatians 6:2. Bear ye one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Number 7, 2 more and we're done. Prepare for the ordinances. What a privilege it is to either witness in a baptism of a new believer or to share in the Lord's Supper together. When you're not here at church, you miss out on those very basic things that you ought to see in your Christian life. And lastly, support the work of the ministry. A committed member gives resources, time, and talent to the furtherance of the gospel through the local church. We all have different gifts, but the same Lord. A committed member both receives and applies the grace of God by working to support the ministry of the local church. I have one simple question to ask you in conclusion. On a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to Rogers City Baptist Church? If it's not a 10, why? Ask yourself why. Why am I not committed? If it's an 8 or a 9 or a 5, why am I not committed? Is there an issue that I need to resolve between a brother? Is there something that I need to work on inwardly? Do I need to make church more of a priority? And if it is a 10, you say, I am committed. I'm here to stay. I want to ask you this question. How long are you going to stay here? Are you going to stay as long as it's fun and it's exciting? Are you going to stay as long as things are going well? Are you going to stay as long as I'm the pastor? How committed of a church member are you? A healthy church member is an expositional listener. A healthy church member is a biblical theologian, saved and gospel saturated, and a healthy church member is a committed member.